Yes, I'm Lori Thiel, president of the League of Women Voters here in San Diego. And I just wanted to share with you some details on what's going on and what to look forward to with us and with the State League briefly. June marks the end of our fiscal year. So on June 30th, we will officially transition to our new year, our new board of directors, et cetera. And that means that in July and August, we're going to limit our calendar a little bit. If you go to our website and check our events page, you'll see that the months of July and August are a little bit slower for us than typical, and that's why. That'll be the reason why. So with that, I'd like to recommend that you visit our website. We just did a recent upgrade. It's gorgeous. It's much more interactive than it used to be. It's easier to navigate. Members have login credentials now, and you can see more detailed information as far as reports and things like that. So take advantage of all the options that our new website upgrade gives you. As far as the State League, the League of Women Voters of California is hosting its convention this month. It's June 7th through the 12th. Our league, our local league here, has 13 voting delegates who will be representing our members here at that convention and voting on issues that are important to us here in San Diego. And that convention will feature keynote speaker Dr. Shirley Weber. So we're really excited to have engaged her in that. She's our new Secretary of State, as you know, and we look forward to having her give us feedback on her new position and how we're moving forward in the state of California. Locally here, our San Diego League is hosting a similarly business type meeting. It's our annual meeting, and we will be doing similar things as the state convention will be doing, which is electing new officers and directors, making bylaw revisions, voting on our budget, et cetera. So it's a busy month for our organizations, both at the state level and the local level. And to all of our members out there, I want to encourage you to attend our annual meeting. It's June 19th. You can register on our website. Just go there again, look at our events and click on June 19th annual meeting. It's really important that you make your voices heard. We're a voting rights organization, so we expect our members to show up and vote. So with that, I'm going to quickly check the chat and see if we have anybody I can recognize. We like to recognize our public servants because who would do all the hard work for us out there if we weren't represented by our public servants. Today we have joining us Dr. Michael Mcqueary. He's a school board member of the San Diego Unified School District, and he's also chair of the board of the San Diego International Sister Cities Association. So we are delighted to have you here. Thank you for your service, and thank you for the service of our supervisors who are joining us here today as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our program chair, Kim Knox, and we'll get started with the program.
Thanks, Lori. As a reminder, I want to let everyone know that LWV is nonpartisan, and we never support or oppose any political party or political candidate. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. Today, we'll hear from 2 county supervisors who were elected in November 2020, and we've asked them to reflect on their first 5 months in office and share with us all their priorities and the frustrations they've encountered. The 3rd supervisor elected last fall, Joel Anderson, was also invited, but he's out of town this week. First, we will hear from Vice Chair Nora Vargas, followed by a question and answer session with her. And then at 2:30, Supervisor Tara Lawson Riemer will join the webinar for her presentation and Q&A. Vice Chair Vargas represents the residents of the 1st Supervisorial District on the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. And she has the honor of being the first Latina, the first woman of color, and the first immigrant to serve in this capacity. Vice Chair Vargas serves as co-chair of the county's COVID-19 subcommittee, chair for Sandag's Transportation Committee, and the Air Pollution Control District. She also serves as vice chair for the Regional Task Force on the Homeless's Continuum of Care Advisory Board of Directors. She serves as a board member for the National Association of Latino Elected Officials and Mothers Out Front, and is an advisory board member for Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, Equality California, and the San Diego LGBT Community Center's South Bay Youth Center. Prior to her election, Vice Chair Vargas was an elected member and president of the Southwestern College Governing Board. She also served as the vice president of Community and Government Relations at Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest, where she worked to increase access to safe, quality healthcare and education for women and families across California. She was the first Latino to be appointed to the California State Teachers Retirement System. Vice Chair Vargas, I'll turn it over to you now.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. And guess what? We actually missed that I actually serve as the San Diego County's SD Sarah Retirement Board as well. So I have the honor of serving in that capacity. Thank you for that beautiful, wonderful introduction. It really is my honor to be here. And before I give you a little bit of insight of what it's been like to serve in this capacity and some of the opportunities and challenges in this role, I just want to say thank you to everyone at the League of Women Voters for what you do every day to make sure that our communities have objective information on the issues and on candidates and on things that matter for us to really have a strong civil society. So I wanted just to say thank you for that. Thank you for everything that you do. And so I think the last time that I joined the League of Women Voters was during the campaign trail, and I can't believe that it's been 5 months already that I've had the honor to serve as a supervisor for the County of San Diego, representing District 1, and to have the opportunity to serve as vice chair of the board as well. I think for those who don't know me, I want to make sure that I start off by telling folks a little bit about me, because it really is what makes me who I am today, and really is the foundation for how I make a lot of my decisions in this public policy process. Right, my commitment really has been to the families of San Diego County and District 1 is really rooted on my family values. I was born and raised in Tijuana, and I grew up on both sides of the border. This is what we call, I consider myself a fronteriza, or what most would say is I have a very interesting or unique cross-border experience for this area that I think provides me with an understanding of the power of who we are as a region. And as it was mentioned, you know, for more than 20 years, I dedicated my life to removing barriers for underserved communities through civic engagement, public policy, and community organizing. And I have served in numerous roles throughout the years. And so for me, you know, I think what happened in the combination of the work that I did at Planned Parenthood and as a trustee for Southwestern College, I think really transformed me, because I saw firsthand how the disparity gap continued to widen in our communities. And, you know, I've talked about the fact that many of our faculty was sleeping in their cars because housing wasn't affordable, or many of our students were coming to school without access to food. And we ended up creating, you know, a food pantry at our schools. And to me, it felt like, how is this happening in the 5th largest economy in the world? Our kids should not be going hungry, and everybody deserves to have shelter, right? And I also saw that transportation was another big issue. And so, you know, I have the honor of representing transit dependent communities that have been underinvested for decades. And we've had those conversations about what it's like to moving around when, you know, for our working families, and how tough that is for them. And so when I realized, I sort of thought about what my next step was, and I really loved my job as an executive for Planned Parenthood, and I loved being a trustee, but I wanted to really have the opportunity to use my experience and knowledge and put it to work in government, because I felt that I really wanted government to work for all of us. And so for me, county government, I knew could make a difference. And I did that because, you know, county government is supposed to be the safety net for our communities. And so when I ran for office, I did so because I wanted government, like I said, to work for everyone, to our families in District 1. And I often said, you know, that government is not something separate from us, it really is us. And so as a supervisor, I want to make sure that government is working for everyone, not just some. And so I would say to you that never in my wildest dreams that I think that, number one, I would be running a campaign under COVID, which I did and won successfully. And number two, to be able to govern in my first 5 months as a county supervisor, along with being the first at so many of these different roles that I bring with me, right? The hats that I bring with me to the table, to be able to be in this role where I'm actually helping mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 which particularly in my District 1 has impacted us in a very negative way. And to have an opportunity to really focus on economic recovery to benefit all communities while still fighting for equity and inclusivity and creating systemic change has been the privilege of a lifetime. And so fast forward, here we are 5 months since the day that I was able to get sworn in. And really, I feel that there is a new era in county government where we've been able to accomplish some amazing things with my colleagues, both Supervisor Tara Lawson Riemer and Chair Fletcher. I think that we have done an amazing job at really shifting the county. And I will say that I feel like we are much more transparent and responsive as a county government. I feel that we are making sure that people have access to the services they need. I am really proud that I've been able to introduce 21 board letters that have all been equity minded, really from this concept of building healthier and stronger communities. And our focus has really been in creating, at least my focus really has been on creating institutional change, right? Because I really believe that our communities deserve better. They deserve to have the resources they need. And it's this idea of not only surviving, but thriving. And I have to say that I am very grateful to the incredible team that I've been able to assemble. I'm really proud of them. I call them, it's a group of social justice warriors. They were all activists, policy, champions in issues that I really cared about throughout District 1 and advocating for our communities. And actually, a friend of mine coined them the District 1 Equity Squad. And it's truly because they understand the importance of listening and giving back to the community and really looking at things from that equity lens every day. And so the conversations that we have every day is that we wake up every day knowing that we're going to be working to make a difference in people's lives, right? How do we make a person's lives better in the county of San Diego without them even knowing that we're doing that? And that's, to me, really important. And it makes me very happy when I hear from my constituents that my office is responsive to their issues and their needs. There's always room for improvement, but I have to say that we are always reminded about why we're here. And so some of the things that I would say, if I try to be one of those people that everything is half full instead of half empty. As the first woman of color, first Latina who served in many of these capacities, I've had to make sure that I always look at the world from when people say no, I always say, well, okay, well, if not no, well, then how do we do this? And what other way can we do this? I'm not good at taking no for an answer. And so I don't really look at things as challenges, and I don't have a lot of frustrations other than, government is a little bit slower than what I'm used to. I'm very action oriented. I like to get things done. So I think I wish things could move a little bit faster, but we've done some really great things, right? We declared racism a public health care crisis, making sure that, it was the first step, I think, in acknowledging the historical health and social economic, disparities in the county of San Diego. And we not only created this opportunity to declare it, but also are creating an infrastructure to really end the destructive cycle of systemic racism and become a more racially equitable and justice-oriented agency. I think, creating an equitable response to COVID-19 has been absolutely one of my priorities. One of my proudest moments, I should say, having, talked about health equity being a key component about the work that we've done. And it made a difference. It made a difference in historically marginalized communities, because I said before, when you are trying to govern during a pandemic, it's easy to sometimes forget about how some of these inequities were already there for our communities prior to the pandemic happening. And so many of our communities were hit harder, and including the communities of District 1. Really, I think for me, one of the big projects that we are working on right now is a sustainable initiative to uplift boys and men of color. I believe in my heart that as a county, we have a moral obligation to identify and remove barriers for our youngest and most at-risk constituencies. And so in partnership with the Office of Race and Equity and other stakeholders, we're going to begin to break down the school to prison pipeline and ensure that there's support and resources in place for these programs. And so we're addressing workforce development, education equity, juvenile justice, and the delivery of wraparound services and trauma support to make sure that young adults that are at risk have what they need. And so we've done some great work already. I, co-authored some board letter with Supervisor Lawson Riemer, specifically on youth environmental recreation corporation and opportunities, right, for workforce development. I'm really proud to say that I launched a new literacy campaign in the county. I think most of you know that I was a trustee at Southwestern College for about 7 years. And one of the biggest challenges that we have in many of our communities is that it's taking about 6 years for a student to transfer from a community college to a university. And a lot of it, in addition to all the demands that students have, right, because they have to have 2 jobs and it's just really tough, there's also this issue of language and literacy, expectations that they're not meeting. And part of it is, I think, a responsibility of us as not only educators, but as a governing system to ensure that people have access to books. And so I'm excited that our first little libraries in District 1 are going to be unveiled, and we have already a lot of people who are interested in signing up. So if anybody who is interested in joining us, I will say that when I found out that there was only 4 official little libraries in District 1, and District 1 has 650,000 people from Point Loma, Coronado, all the way down to San Isidro. To me, it says a lot about where our priorities are as a community and so as a government. And so I wanted to make sure that those resources were available. And I'm so grateful for the county staff, but also the different foundations that are going to be committing the opportunity to have some books. And then last but not least, I would say the Climate Advisory Committee has been a really big issue, right? I introduced an environmental justice package that included, the focus around the cross-border pollution at the Tijuana River Valley and making that a public health crisis. This is a declaration that was adopted unanimously by my colleagues. And then we created an environmental justice task force that's addressing some of these issues. And then just last month, I established the Office of Environmental and Climate Justice, really to integrate environmental justice in the policymaking process and making investments in the communities that have been impacted by toxins and waste for decades. I want to make sure that I leave time for questions. So can you let me know how much time I have? So that I want to make sure that
Yeah, we should probably move to questions pretty soon. We've got several.
Okay, so why don't I go ahead and just give you a quick and end up letting you know where I'm at. I have, let's see, I serve I'm the chair of SANDAG Transportation Committee, and so I'm working to ensure that we have a world-class transportation system that's reliable and accessible and affordable, that really truly connects our community. So really looking at that from an equity lens. I'm also very proud to serve as the chair of the Air Pollution Control District. It's the first time that it's separated from the County of San Diego. So we're going to be prioritizing environmental and climate justice to make sure that our communities that have been impacted by air pollution and toxins, really now we find solutions. Vice chair of the Regional Task Force on Homelessness, and we're working on a regional plan to ensure that we remove barriers for unsheltered populations. And I could actually sit here and talk to you for hours about our vaccine equity work that we've done. But I'm really happy to say that in the county, in the South region, which I represent, due to our ongoing efforts and interventions to address health equity, 99% of our residents in South region who are 65 years or older have received at least 1 vaccine. And anyone who is 12 years and older has received, 75.2% of anyone who is 12 and older has actually received 1 dose. This is really important because when we first started, there was a big gap, particularly in our communities and communities of color. So I can talk about the interventions and a lot of other different things, including the pilot programs that we set up that are now being extended to North County and the central region as well. But I have to say that, we've accomplished a lot in the last 5 months. We have a lot of work to do. I think, I really believe strongly that in politics and governance, you always have to think about short-term and long-term goals. Because we want to make sure that people see that we are really delivering really quickly. But I also want to make institutional change and to be the first in this seat after 25 years and to be the first person of color, first binational person, first woman, first immigrant. I really want to make sure that I want to leave a legacy to when where I was able to make government work for people, and that it's really based on systemic change. So when I leave, good things can happen for residents of my district, and no matter who's in the seat in the future, it will continue to work for them. So I am going to continue to do this work in partnership with community and with my great team and with all of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you so much. That was a very nice rundown, and we're so delighted that you're so involved and interested and aggressive in your role. I mean, you've really gotten in there and gotten a lot of work done. So with that, I want to go ahead and get to our questions. I want to start by introducing our league observer to the Board of Supervisors. Our organization, since we have an observer corps that we send to public meetings, and they just follow up on and report back to us on the comings and goings and the happenings. And at the Board of Supervisors is Jane Andrews, who's here with us today, and she would like to just pose a couple of questions in general about the board and its direction this year.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Supervisor Vargas. It has been just an honor to watch the change in the Board of Supervisors and to see your work and commitment. I want to dig down a little deeper on the equity topic, as well as your point that you're trying to make some longer term change. I was very interested in your development of an equity impact statement, as well as a budget equity and impact statement. And I wanted to just ask how you think those will evolve and be used over the years ahead.
I know, and I forgot to talk about it when I was speaking. So I'm glad that you asked me about it. So one of the things that I want to make sure, and I think this goes back to the point of systemic change, right? I think the best example for this is when the issue of the vaccines came down, the governor identified 12 zip codes that were supposed to be specific zip codes that we were going to make sure that they had access to vaccines. If you looked at the 12 zip codes, it really did not include some of the zip codes that were in other areas of the county of San Diego that were also have been impacted because of the inequities in the system, healthcare inequities for years, right? And so what we did is we brought in the healthcare index as part of it to really take a look at it, and then it ended up becoming 39 zip codes, right? And so it included areas that otherwise in Spring Valley and El Cajon and Oceanside, and areas that otherwise would not have been part of this. And so as we were distributing the funds for vaccines and outreach and resources, we were looking at who were the folks who were hit the hardest so that we can allocate the resources that we needed to ensure that people had access to vaccinations or COVID testing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it makes a difference because when you have 5 supervisors and everybody has different interests and folks who are asking and for different things, I think as a county, it's really important when we decide that our mission is really to ensure, as the safety net of this region, we want to make sure that those that need it the most are the ones that are taken care of first. And as a board, we made that decision by creating, by presenting and unanimously supporting our board letter under health equity. And so the budget equity tool is the tool that's going to help us measure that we are really addressing the health inequities of the county as we're moving forward. And so I think it'll have a long-term impact, and it can be done in any of the departments. And so we're working together with our budget, our finance director, to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Kim or Lori, do you want to do some of the others? Okay.
Sure, yes, thank you. So in particular, we have a question in the Q&A regarding the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. The Board of Supervisors gets the pleasure and the privilege of each of the supervisors can nominate 2 individuals to serve on that commission. And so I'm just wondering if you could follow up on that. One of our questions in particular from our one of our representatives here with CDAO, Rosemary Straley, has asked you to weigh in on that. CDAO is an ordinance that the League of Women Voters and some other local advocate organizations have partnered with to bring to the city of San Diego and the county. So CDAO stands for the Commission on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And it's it's an ordinance that was produced years and years and years ago globally to help ensure equity for women and girls in society. So with that, can you just comment a little bit about the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls and who your nominees are for that?
Okay, so I'm really super excited that you asked me about this question. First and foremost, I think most of you know, and I'm really proud to say that I'm a feminist, and I've been an activist in the women's movement for all of my career, and as an advocate for Planned Parenthood and a lot of our organizations. So I've been a member of a lot of these groups that have been advocating for representation. And I think you've often may have heard me say that representation matters is not just a hashtag for me. I'm really looking at making sure that representation, not only in gender, but when it comes to equity and diversity and inclusivity is extremely important to me. And so I'm going to continue to champion that. And I am really proud to share that I have appointed the first transgender woman to the Commission on the Status of Women. Her name is Deja. And so she's been appointed already. And then I reappointed Leah, who is also a woman, African-American woman activist from Imperial Beach, to also be on the Commission on the Status of Women. So I'm really proud. I was very intentional about my nominees, and I continue to be intentional about everyone that I'm appointing to boards and commissions, because my commitment is to make sure that different voices are at the table, right? Just as I am the first immigrant on the Board of Supervisors, first binational. And I keep mentioning that because I think it's important that when you're making budget decisions, when you're making policy decisions, outreach, community events, et cetera, it really makes a difference when your experience is different. And so I am committed to not only doing that myself, but making sure that everyone that serves on boards and commissions who is representing District 1 really truly is a representative for District 1. And so I'm really proud of that, and I will continue to advocate for our communities in that matter.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your interest in that particular commission and your dedication to making sure that you have somebody in there, two people in there who are going to represent and move that commission forward. So I appreciate that. Jane, would you like to ask the next question, or would you like me to go? You're muted, Jane.
Oh, sorry. Why don't you go?
Okay. Well, we have a question here from Ann Barron. She's a league member who works with our Criminal Justice Committee. And in particular, she has asked, there have been many educational organizations looking at educational equity as schools reopen. Many of us have been calling for a focus on mental health, restorative practices, and family support. What is the County Board of Supervisors doing specifically to help in this regard?
So we are actually, that's a priority for us as a Board of Supervisor. There are specific pilot programs that have been introduced that we just voted on that are going to be in North County. As part of the budget work that we're doing, we are going to make sure that there are resources for schools. And there's $30 million that have been allocated for mental health. Actually, mental health has been one of the actual areas that has increased the most in a long time out of the county. And so we're going to continue to fund those programs. I am absolutely interested in continuing to do that work. Actually, one of the things that we did in South County is I meet regularly with my school board members throughout the district to make sure that we are addressing some of the challenges that they're facing post-pandemic and making sure that people have access to trauma-informed care. So working with Luke at behavioral health, but also really looking at how all the different departments can have access and representation. My biggest interest is in making sure the school districts have resources, and not only for mental health care, but also for basic healthcare needs as well. So it's a bigger project that we're working on, but absolutely there's already funding in the budget, and we're going to continue to allocate additional resources to that.
Yeah, a lot of these issues are interrelated, as you said, and they, require a broader look, I guess, and broader funding to address.
Yeah, and I think what I think we haven't done well in government, to be honest with you, is these silos, right? And I've been an executive. I was an executive for 25 years for Planned Parenthood, and the first thing that I did is it's number one, you have to meet people where they're at, and number two is you have to break down the silos. find the intersection between our communities and try to figure it out. I say to someone, they're like, why are you on so many boards and committees? But if you think about it, right, being chair of transportation for Sandag, chair of APCD board, and vice chair of homelessness, and the vice chair of the board allows me to kind of integrate some of this work and work together in synergy so that we're moving an agenda that is really an agenda from an equity lens, working on in our communities and what our needs are. The same thing with school districts. There's never enough resources. Parents need to be engaged, communities need to be engaged. And I think we have a lot of opportunities to really talk to each other and make a difference.
Excellent. Well, we have a question here about criminal justice and environmental justice, and those are two more issues that kind of coexist. And this one is from Jeannie Brown. She's our criminal justice committee chair. Our league is working on environmental and criminal justice. One of our concerns is the excessive workloads for our public defender. Do you see that improving over the next few years? And what do you recommend that we concentrate on with either of those topics?
Well, I'm actually looking in to figuring out a way to get additional resources to the public defender's office. We've met with them, worked with them. I think there's still a lot of work to be done on the prevention side. I think additional resources need to be allocated to our probation, department, right? We are in the process of hiring the next leadership at probation, and so we're working on trying to figure out how we get more. I've been working with a lot of the community groups that have different perspectives about what we need to do to ensure that our youth have opportunities. And so job placement is one of them. Mentorship programs, absolutely another one. And I've been trying to identify some of these programs in the community where I know they're already doing an exceptional job. What you want to, having I had the honor of overseeing the education programs at Planned Parenthood, and so we did a lot of work with the foster youth, right, in the community, juvenile justice courts. We were actually in juvenile justice providing education, and so this is a topic that's really close and dear to my heart, and I want to continue to do that work so that it's really systemic change, which is why I introduced the initiative around the Boys and Men of Color, because I wanted to bring together these communities, these groups that were already doing good work, and then making sure that it was a priority for the County of San Diego so that they're not just all working in silos, but working together to identify some long-term changes for our district and the community as a whole. But I think for me, it's really important because, the community of District 1 has had very different representation for many years, and my values are different. And so I want to make sure that we have that representation as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, Supervisor Lawson Riemer has joined us, and I'd like to give her time to participate as well. So I want to thank you, Vice Chair Vargas, for your time and your attention today to the issues that are so important to our city and our community and our county. And I'd like to hand it over to Kim, our program chair, again for the introduction of our other supervisor who's joining us today.
Well, let me just say thank you for having me.
Of course.
But I wanted to say thank you, and you're in wonderful hands with my colleague, and I'm sure it'll be amazing. So thank you so much for having me. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, for our next speaker, Supervisor Tara Lawson Riemer is a third-generation San Diegan who served as senior advisor in the Obama administration, developing environmental policies to cut pollution from oil drilling and mining. She has worked around the world to create jobs, restart businesses, and generate economic activity after a crisis as an economist with the United Nations and World Bank. Supervisor Lawson Riemer has a PhD and a law degree from NYU, and she is also a certified emergency medical responder. Supervisor Lawson Riemer is known for environmental leadership and working to implement a bold county climate action plan to fight climate change and create new economic opportunities for local businesses and workers. Since joining the board, Supervisor Lawson Riemer has been appointed to represent the county on Sandag, the Regional Transportation Authority. Supervisor Lawson Riemer has also brought forward significant policy proposals to reform the region's incarceration system to reflect smart justice best practices, including free phone calls for incarcerated individuals and the expansion of mobile crisis response teams instead of armed law enforcement. She also spearheaded the launch of San Diego County's new immigrant legal defense program. Supervisor Lawson Riemer, welcome, and please tell us more.
Well, first of all, I am a huge fan of you all and all the work that you do. So it's a real honor to be here today. I am not going to talk very long. I'm just going to say a few words because I'm mostly interested in hearing from you and answering any questions you have. This has been a very, very, very busy first 5 months. We inherited a county that frankly, had been focused on doing as little as possible for as long as possible. And I'm very grateful to have colleagues with me on this board, on this new board, who have been amazing partners in trying to forge a new framework for the future of San Diego County. And working together, I think we've begun to make pretty big strides. But I will be quite honest, it takes a long time to turn a big ship around. So while I have a number of incredibly exciting announcements and initiatives underway, I also every day am more and more aware that to change the direction of an entity that has over 18,000 employees, that has a budget of almost $7 billion, impacting 3.3 million people, is a enormous undertaking and is not something that we're going to accomplish in the first year or two or even three. I feel like if at the end of my 8 years on the county board, we've really managed to transform the county, that would be an enormous accomplishment. So I do think that's one of my big lessons so far, is that there's so much work that needs to be done. And the change that we're looking to enact is really deep and structural. It is not something that happens overnight. So with that being said, I want to talk about a couple of the big things that we've enacted so far that I'm really excited about. You mentioned one of them. That is our new legal defense program for immigrants who are facing deportation here in San Diego County. As most of you know, I'm an attorney by training, and access to justice and due process of law is, to me, one of our most fundamental sacred rights here in this country. And the idea that we could have people ripped from their homes, ripped from their families, and not have the opportunity to have a fair day in court is an insult to American values. And it I think is a grave injustice. So I am incredibly excited that we've been able to move forward with a pilot program here in San Diego County, starting after the new budget is enacted in July, to provide attorneys to individuals detained in San Diego County and facing deportation. And this will benefit not only members of our community who are swept up in raids, but also people who are coming here to seek a better life, coming from other countries that have been torn by war, people who are fleeing terror and devastation. And I know for me, it's quite personal, because my great-grandparents immigrated to the United States fleeing pogroms in Eastern Europe and the persecution and massacre of Jews. And I would not be here today. They would not have survived if there had not been a country that opened its doors to protect freedom and liberty and opportunity for all. And that's what our country stands for. And even though the federal government for far too long has failed to protect those rights, I am so proud that here in San Diego County, we can step forward and protect those rights of immigrants coming into our community. So that is an initiative that I think is incredibly exciting and really groundbreaking. I also want to talk for a moment about some of the reforms we're making in terms of smart justice and criminal justice. It is such a tragedy, the number of innocent lives that are lost because you have an inappropriate response, an armed law enforcement response to a situation that should not ever, ever, ever call for a cop with a gun. People who are experiencing homelessness or mental health crises or other kinds of behavioral health issues, and they need help, they need support. They need an opportunity to get back on their feet. They don't need a cop showing up and shooting them. And so long as we fail to provide alternatives, then all we are left with are police officers, and they're being asked to do things that they're not trained to do. So I'm very excited about our mobile crisis response teams because though that is providing the framework and the resources to ensure that the right kind of people with the right kind of training are sent out to the community to respond to calls that are not threats to life and property, right? That are absolutely should never result in armed police officers showing up with a gun. So I'm very excited about that. I think it's really vital. On the same vein, one of the first things that we did on taking office was to ensure that incarcerated members of our community have access to free phone calls. For really decades, this county has been profiteering from inmates, charging a lot of money, sometimes $15 for a short phone call to loved ones, and with bills adding up to the hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month. For people to be able to just talk to their children, talk to their parents. It's incredibly sad, incredibly tragic. And I'm, again, really proud that we have the kind of new leadership on this Board of Supervisors that could overturn those old policies and ensure that incarcerated members of our community can connect with loved ones, can connect with their children, and can stay connected to their communities while they're in jail. It's not only the humane and right and just thing to do, it's also incredibly important for rehabilitation and reintegration. There's a lot of research that says that folks who feel connected to family and loved ones have a much, much higher likelihood of success on being reintegrated. And it's when you lose those connections that you fall back into the justice system over and over and over again. So these are two initiatives that I'm really excited about. And we're going to continue doing a lot more work in this vein in terms of access to justice and smart justice. I want to talk for a moment about another initiative that I am also really excited about. It's our Office of Evidence, Policy and Analytics. And this is really a first of its kind endeavor at any county across the country to really invest in research and put the resources down to ensure that we actually know what's working and not working for our community. It's an enormous amount of resources, $7 billion we spend every single year, and we have incredibly little data to show whether these programs are actually making a difference. And to understand which kinds of innovations could improve outcomes for our vulnerable members of our community. We don't know, because we're not tracking, we're not doing monitoring and evaluation and impact assessments. We certainly do have data across the county, but it's the wrong kind of data. It's very, very sparse. It just shows us, which communities have been served by a program and what, how many people have enrolled, but we don't know what the outcomes are. We don't know what the impacts are. We don't know what the long-term results are in our communities. So moving towards an evidence-based model for policymaking is, again, going to be a long road. It's not something we're going to do overnight, but it's something I'm very committed to. I would hope that you all are also very committed to, because it's the kind of data and evidence and orientation towards learning from setbacks and scaling up successes that allows us to build a county that over time embraces innovation and embraces an approach to ensuring that our county works for everyone. So I think this is one of those kinds of initiatives that is unlikely to bear fruit in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, but the long-term results can be really fundamental and really transformative across so many areas of where the county works and operates. So I'm happy to talk about some specific programs that we're looking to assess in the next couple years. So we already have some program evaluations beginning to roll forward, but I'm very excited about that. I said I wasn't going to talk the whole time because I definitely want your questions, but I just want to mention one other bucket of work, which I'm really excited about, which is the work that we're doing on climate. And this is not just about climate, but it's also about affordable housing and quality of life, because these pieces all fit together. Part of what's been driving our climate crisis here in San Diego County is sprawl. 40% of carbon emissions in San Diego County come from cars idling in traffic. And at the same time, when we're building sprawl development, we're paving over precious open spaces that serve as vital carbon sinks and incredibly important biodiversity reserves. And so we can't possibly think about tackling climate and protecting our biodiversity if we're not also thinking about how do we build affordable housing in the right places near where people live and where people work and where there's transit, because what has been driving that sprawl has been a lack of access to affordable housing. So we're really focused on both the push and the pull around climate and biodiversity and protecting our open space, which is on the one hand to look for infill opportunities, to look for how we can build more homes near transit, how we can build more transit, how we can improve the quality of life in places near where people work, so that we're not being forced to live farther and farther from our jobs, being stuck in traffic, being stuck in sprawl, and at the same time paving over our precious biodiversity here in San Diego. So we've launched a new initiative called the Regional Sustainability Plan, which is extremely exciting. So UCSD and USD, two of our leading universities, have teamed up, and they're developing a regional sustainability plan that sort of goes from bottom up. What do we need? What do we as a county need to do to be the gold standard in taking action on climate and biodiversity? And they'll be coming back to us in the beginning of next year with a set of recommendations. I'll guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people who don't like those recommendations because change is always hard. So I'm 100% going to be coming to you all and letting you know that this is happening, and and making sure people are aware and have the opportunity to make their voices heard about what kind of community they want to live in, because I'm excited for these initiatives to safeguard our planet for future generations. But we can only do so much alone. As supervisors, it really is going to take a big, broad community effort to move these policies forward. So with that, let me just stop and see if there's any questions.
Well, thank you so much. You really hit the high points with this group with your presentation so far. You and I have met before, but I just want to reintroduce myself. I'm Lori Thiel. I'm the president here of the league here in San Diego, and I'm going to be moderating the questions along with some of our other league members, Jane Andrews and Kim Knox, who's our program chair. Before we move forward to questions, I have a specific question with regard to your evidence-based model for the initiative that you started. What is the name of that, and where can I get more information on that?
So it's called the Office of Evaluation, Performance, and Analytics. And we're in the process right now of getting it stood up. So the first step is to hire a chief evaluation officer. So that there's going to be a search underway starting in about a month. We're in the process of putting together the search terms and figuring out what the right qualifications are. So that's one piece of it. There's also a advisory committee, a research advisory committee. And so there's a second reading of the ordinance establishing this research advisory committee on our Tuesday meeting. And then 30 days after that, the research advisory committee will be put into effect. And every supervisor, I think, has 2 appointments and looking for researchers. So, mostly folks who have a PhD or sort of other equivalent training in doing research design and program design. So that is kind of the broad overview. But if you want more specifics, the best thing would be for you to follow up with Spencer. I think he has been the point of contact. He can send the board letter that we wrote, and that is pretty detailed and has the whole policy outlined.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. I don't want to spend too much time, but that was very interesting, and I really appreciate that initiative. So with that, I'm going to introduce you now to Jane Andrews. Our organization has an observer corps. People who've been on this call already know this, but I just wanted to let you know that Jane is our representative to the Board of Supervisors. She attends your meetings. She reports back to us. She lets us know what the news of the day is and what direction the supervisors are taking the county, et cetera. So I want to introduce you to her and let her take the first question, or give you the first question. Jane?
Okay. I don't know if I'm on, but Supervisor Lawson Riemer, it's been such a pleasure for me an honor to watch the board over the last few months, and your role as an advocate for so many issues that are near and dear to the league's heart has really been stunning. I think both housing and climate change are very central issues for this league. And we are going to be watching that very closely and hoping to assist with education. But I wanted to ask you a little more about the regional sustainability plan. Can you tell us a little more as to what you're hoping to see with that, as well as what you think some of the challenges and pushback are likely to be?
So, what am I hoping to see? I'll be honest, I really want to be blank slate about it because I want to give, the researchers the space to do the research. And I thought that was why I thought it was so important that USD and UCSD partnered on this endeavor, that they could just, think a lot more blue sky, and not be kind of stuck in our political kind of silos where we often recycle the same old ideas and get stuck on the same old ideas. So I've been pretty careful to say, like, what I am hoping for is a plan to get San Diego County as a region to zero carbon by 2030. We'll see what they come up with.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything else, Jane? Do you want to follow up?
Let's go with some of the others.
Okay, well, I have one here. We actually have a couple of questions regarding poverty here in San Diego. And I'll just ask one by Joni Halpern. She's a league member who's very involved in poverty law and our criminal justice committee. Her question is, the county general relief is set at about $381 a month as a program of last resort for indigent persons. Do you see any possibility that level of aid will be elevated, or that there will be efforts to link general relief clients with real opportunities for some type of subsidized housing, since that general relief allocation is so meager?
It's an excellent question. So I think the notion that it would rise is, I'd say, probably unlikely. I think the second idea around subsidized housing is an excellent idea that has actually not been looked at, to my knowledge. I think is definitely worth looking into. And I will certainly start seeing what we can do on that front.
I have one of my own. I'm going to jump in because I think it covers some of the items that many people have asked. So regarding housing, can you talk a little more about what ways you think we can really work on affordable housing? I know you've been working on the housing element in the general plan, but what sort of teeth can we put in our affordable housing programs?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, I think everyone's thinking way too small. I think we got to think way outside the box. We're not going to get housing by like tinkering at the margins, because we have, like a very, very fundamental market failure where the cost of land, right? Like, land, labor, and capital, the three inputs, all three are very high, the costs are high and far exceed, ability to pay. And at the same time, we have a huge, overwhelming rise in demand. So it's both about increasing supply, but also reducing costs of inputs. It's both pieces. And then there's the third part about equity. It's not just the issues on supply. It's that some people, graduated at difficult times, or they don't have any way of amassing wealth because incomes have not kept pace with the cost of housing. And so you have lots of, especially young people who, it's so much harder to buy a first house now than it was even 15 years ago. So if you didn't get in the housing market, by like 2009, 2010, it becomes, which is sort of the last big crash in San Diego, it becomes extremely difficult to get into the housing market because your income is totally outpaced. So there's also a generational equity as well as a racial equity gap that is all about capital and capital accumulation, that we have to be very aware that this is not like a distributionally neutral question. So all that being said, I know I've just outlined a bunch of problems. So some of the stuff I'm interested in are like, what if we acquire a bunch of land on transit corridors and use that land to build massive amounts of affordable housing? Because that's what they've done in other countries. They actually made these as public investments. What if we did more mixed use housing and where there's where there's where the county is able to acquire land or already owns land that's very valuable to cross subsidize and to build market rate housing, use the proceeds from that to build affordable housing in other parts of San Diego that are where the land is less expensive. So that's sort of another piece of it. It's a lot of this is focused on an idea called land value capture, where you're not just upzoning and assuming that if you allow more buildings to be built, that it'll be affordable, because that's not how it works. Like, you just upzone, you have more density and it's still expensive. So all that does is lead to a windfall profit for the lucky folks who happen to own the property that gets upzoned, because then their property is worth a lot more because it's been upzoned, but you don't end up with affordable housing. So you really need to be looking at mechanisms that actually capture the value of upzoning and is able to use the value of the upzone value for affordable housing investments. So I mentioned a couple mechanisms. The one when most of the time you talk about land value capture, one of the clearest things, most common is around inclusionary housing, and that I think our inclusionary housing requirements are too low. We should be much higher if we're going to upzone. Then the whole value of that upzone value should be transferred back in terms of affordable units. I'm interested as well in looking at programs that would create below market homes for purchase, not just for rent. Because a lot of what the challenges that we're all seeing are not only the rental market. We're talking a lot of is coming from a lack of available stock of starter homes, and people being able to get into the housing market in the first place. So I'm very interested in programs to make those homes available. How are we going to do this? I don't have an answer yet. I think we're at the very beginning of a process. We're going to be bringing forward what I'm calling the research board letter, which doesn't sound very exciting, probably in July or August, that outlines, we're looking at 10 to 15 some are wild, some are less wild ideas of what we could do on affordable housing, and putting together a working group to report back, really doing a deep dive on all of these issues. Everything from, okay, how do we get more homes in Sereno Valley? Because Sereno Valley is right by transit and right by job centers. So everything from, like, what does it take to do that? Is it a zoning overhaul to, is public banking something that's a viable option? Looking at these land value recapture ideas. So I think right now we're still in the phase of trying to make sure people understand that when I talk about affordable housing, I'm not talking about just cutting more regulations. It might be a piece of the puzzle, but it's not enough. Like, I'm begging everyone to be much more ambitious, and not just saying, well, I would like to have, slightly fewer CEQA, guidelines that I have to follow.
Well, we really appreciate your efforts on affordable housing and a thoughtful approach to that. I also am really impressed by your interest in immigration and immigration reform and opportunities to, affect immigration policies here in San Diego, because we really here in this, where we live, obviously, that's an issue that's of great importance to us. I know that you're strapped for time, but I was wondering, do you have time for one more question that is not concerning those issues?
Go for it.
Okay, well, so I will give you some insight into us. I mean, if you've probably discerned, we're very much interested in immigration policy reform and affordable housing and transportation and smart growth and all that. But we're also focusing on environmental and criminal justice. So in general, could you just give us some tips on how to move forward with you in that regard to help improve and address environmental and criminal justice policies here in San Diego?
Yes. Gosh. So we are encouraging folks to be involved in this regional sustainability plan process and the CAP process, because it's really important to have community input, to make sure that we're really being ambitious around these climate targets. And so we're putting together a roadmap of opportunities for public engagement. And so I think one thing to do would be, I think, Lori, if you could connect back with Spencer in probably 2 or 3 weeks, he should have that roadmap of opportunities for community engagement on our climate, for climate advocacy. And I think that could make a big contribution. And on the criminal justice reform work, one of the things that we're definitely looking at is, are there lessons learned from COVID around decarceration? And there's a lot of people who were early released or never booked under COVID protocols because of jail overcrowding concerns during the pandemic. And so I'm going to be taking a deep dive over the next 6 months to try to better understand, are there booking offenses that shouldn't be being booked at all in the first place, that it doesn't make sense. And now we can have the data to see that, because we can see that, what happened under COVID and who was out in the community safely. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. And I'd say, again, that is going to be a big issue, probably less this year and more next year, like looking for the next year's budget cycle.
Excellent. I know that you're strapped for time and this feels kind of like a speed date. I feel like we've just like fired questions at you, and I appreciate your indulgence with us. And I really look forward to our organization working closely with you to move forward on some of the issues you've brought up today. You've hit all the right notes with us. We're very well aligned in a lot of the issues that you've brought forward today. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. I truly do appreciate you taking time to stop in today and connect with us. And I look forward to our organization working more closely with you as we move forward. So keep in touch. Let's find ways that we can advocate together.
I am so grateful for your time as well, and incredibly grateful for everything that you do. So
thank you so much. I'd like to invite all of our attendees to please click the chat and fulfill the survey that we send out at the end of all these meetings, so that we can get a sense of how well you fared here and what you liked and didn't like. That helps us improve our programs to you. And with that, unless Kim or Jane have anything to add, we can say goodbye.
I just would add, somebody asked how they could get the transcript and video of this. It will be on our website as early as tomorrow. And it will be available into the future.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you all for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.